All right, how's it going, everybody? We are going to try a little bit different format here. I got a request from part-time design students to review some concepts on design systems. Since I don't work the same hours as part-time, um, even more so now that I am on Eastern time, um, I am going to try to record this and do this in a format that hopefully is something we could potentially replicate in the future. So let me share my screen and kind of show you what I'm doing. All right. Okay, so we're going to jump over. So I created a new document. So if you start in our beautiful Unicorn Labs and Beyond UX design page, you come here under resources. I've created a new section down here called UX topic refreshers with the refreshing drink to help you remember. And then I've just started with our first page in here. So if we have other topics like this in the future, where you're just like, Dave, I don't get this. I need some help. I need a refresher, whatever. I'll create a new page in here. We'll do a recording and I'll follow the same format. I'll ask you, give me all of your specific questions around this topic, and then I'll try to cover them all. And I think the theory is that that will be more effective than me just in a box prepping a deck of what I think I should teach you. Sometimes that doesn't always answer all of your questions. So we'll see how this goes. Let me know what you think of this and if this is helpful. So let's get started. Number one, what even is a design system? I do have a little bit of a deck for this. And so I'm going to jump into that here. Let me move my Zoom controls out of the way. I'm just going to go fairly quick. Pro tip, when you go into presentation mode, usually it's kind of like done in like a fill mode. If you just hit the letter Z, that's the same as the zoom controls that pop up over here, and it'll just cycle through all those different ones. Anyway, so design systems. I just grabbed this funny graphic over here for the title page because everybody's always like talking about them like they're so sophisticated and ooh, these shiny things, and everybody needs to use them. And you're not a UX designer if you don't have a design system, whatever. Sorry to burst your bubble. It's like, yes, they're excellent. They're great tools, but like, I wouldn't call them like any like type of like magic or anything. They do make you incredibly efficient if you use them right. But they're not too crazy to learn. So relax. Don't feel like this is anything, overly technical or whatever. You guys can all pick this up. So what is a design system? At its core, it's just a set of reusable components. So I've got a picture of Legos here. Everybody's played with Legos. There is a common format to Legos, right? They all connect together in the same way. The spacing of those little dots is always the same. The size of the dots are always the same. And then oftentimes you'll have the same repeated bricks in a set. You may have a whole bunch of like red bricks to make a house or something. And then you'll have a handful of like roof tile bricks or whatever, or you're making like a little picket fence or something, and you've got some little fence bricks that you're clicking together. I wouldn't know anything about this. I always just built spaceships and airplanes when I was little. But I do love Legos, and I think this illustrates the concept well. So set of reusable components, you could bust those apart. You could go make something else with them. You can use them to make all sorts of different things, and you're just starting with the same building blocks. This is a lot more efficient than like saying, okay, make like a little toy spaceship or whatever, and I give you like a little shovel and a saw and say, go mine or harvest some natural resources, come back and turn it into cement and actual cured lumber or whatever, and build something. Legos are something that's ready to go out of the box, and you can start building immediately. Why are design systems important? Oops. Here we go. Design systems allow you to iterate quickly. They allow you to design at scale. So like I was at Symantec, my team had like 15 different products we were working on. we need them all to be consistent. We need them all to follow the same type of patterns. We need them to fit together. Sometimes they would be like integrated and you'd be jumping between them and stuff like that. How do you make sure that everything stays consistent when you've got 15 different designers on 15 different products, different time zones, all over the place, totally different requirements? You use a design system. 3, I kind of just talked about this. It maintains cohesion across your designs. So when we used it effectively, you could visit any one of these products and be like, oh, this is a Symantec product. And then lastly, it makes it much easier to communicate between designers and developers. So when you can create a system around your buttons and say, these are all the different variations that we will ever have in a button, they won't ever look any different than this. The only thing that's going to be different is likely the text that's in there or the icon or whatever. Then your developers can build a really great reusable component in one spot. And then whenever they're building a page out or whatever, they're always going to call that one button they already created and just create an instance of it in their code. So then when you later decide, hey, all of our buttons are, our primary action color was green and I changed my mind, it's now purple. And so all of our green buttons now need to be purple buttons. They can change that in the styling. Everything's connected to the same button. Boom. That's an easy push to make. So next topic is probably more related to that initial question, like what even are design systems, right? You're going to hear this term. You're going to hear a lot of similar, different terms. And sometimes, depending on who you talk to, they may say design system and mean slightly different things than what you mean as a UX designer. So let me just cover a few common terms that you're going to hear. Design libraries, design languages, and sometimes, again, like if you ask like a developer what a design language is, that could mean a completely different thing. Component libraries, pattern libraries, and I've even heard some people call them toolkits or component toolkits. And there's a whole bunch of other terms, other combinations of these words, whatever. So I just want you to understand that, like, when you hear that, make sure you kind of ask them about the context and what they're talking about, and then make sure that matches your concept in your head of what you're trying to communicate about. So when a designer is talking about a design system, it's usually referring to like what you've experienced so far in Figma. So that will be like, you're building out your product. Hey, I've officially decided on my button style, my text field style. I've decided on my app bar style, whatever it is. I've finalized what these are going to look like. I'm going to make a component, and boom, my primary action button is finished. And I want to make it in a way so that I can just change the text and it's always updated. It's ready to go. And then they're all linked throughout my designs. So that is typically how we view them in the design world. For a developer, they are kind of like the dev implementation of a design system. So if you hand over this Figma file of all these designs and you've got this whole set of like components or whatever, they would then build out these components into code. So they'll look at this button that you've created and they'll say, how do we make this reusable? Let's make sure we make this nice and flexible and build this right in one place. And then they will build that version of your button. And then the idea is when they've got the same button built as you have in your design system in Figma, then as you build out a page or you design out a page and you hand over that spec and they look at the page, they can see, oh, hey, look, here's 5 of those buttons, the same button that I already created. I don't need to go in and like create a new instance. I don't need to like build out a new custom button here or whatever. I just call primary button, change the text, change the icon if there is one or whatever, change the state, and boom, I'm ready to go. Same thing with all other elements on a page. So when design's got that set up well on their end and devs got that all set up well on their end, everything's built out, you can actually design a page really fast, hand it over to devs, and they can build it out really fast because they're literally just taking their already pre-built Lego pieces and they're putting them together in their code the same way you did it in your design file. Okay, so this is kind of what it looks like just from the perspective of a designer. So this is just like a sample, like UI kit, but it's pretty common to have like a big page or multiple pages of like all of, say, your different styles, your components or whatever. You can see, you know, they've kind of like formatted them nicely in these little like paint swatches or whatever. They've got some textiles down here. And then over here is where you actually get into some hard components, right? Here's some different like button styles. And then you would have these nicely organized here. So it's easy for someone to skim through, see what they're working with. And then you make these into components, and then they would show up, you know, over on the left in your asset panel. And then you can drag them and drop them. If you're working with a bigger team, you can actually publish it as a library. All a library means is that you're making it available for multiple people in your organization to all see it and get updates. So nothing crazy you need to be worried about there. Oh wait, I need to go back to here. Okay, so I'm just gonna just show you really quickly what it kind of looks like for the developers. So I come in here, let's talk about Ant Design. We're going to talk about Ant Design a lot during this call. But so oftentimes when a developer builds out a design system, they'll use a tool, maybe like Storybook or something else, where they will actually end up with kind of this type of a page, like a components page, a web page. It might just be local to your local you know, network at your office or whatever. But then you would have like buttons in here, right? And I could click into buttons, and they'll usually build it so that you'll select your component over here. You'll have a whole bunch of documentation. You have some examples that you can like click on and try out and different things like that. It'll tell you about all the different ways you can use the buttons and whatever. And then it'll give documentation on how to call it in the code or use it or whatever else is needed to actually build with it. So you can see there's some similarities in like what you see in the side panel in Figma. But there's a lot more like written instructions on how to use this, if that makes sense. All right, so let me jump back in here. I'm just going to touch on a couple reasons why like we're using Ant Design. So one, it's super robust, meaning every single type of component you know, you could ask for are in there. There's no real reason for us to all start from scratch. That takes a lot of time, and we're usually, you know, strapped for time in labs and everything. It's very well documented and supported both on the design side and the dev side. And then lastly, it's very neutral and it's a good starting point, as opposed to the common pushback I always hear is like, why can't I use material design? Material design, material design, material design. Material design is a great design library as far as like its functionality. It serves its purpose, but the downside is it looks like it's from Google. And anytime you use material design, everyone can tell, and it sometimes can kind of like diminish your work as a designer. If someone looks at it and is like, oh, you use material design for this, that means you really didn't have to put a whole lot of effort into like styling or customizing or whatever. So Ant Design is very neutral. So you get a lot of great stuff just starting right out of the box. You tweak it with your colors, your corner radiuses, your type, your things like that, and you're going to end up with a great looking product. But it's not like there's no like asterisk by it, like, oh, but like, you know, I can tell what that is. I'm going to stop there with that presentation. Let me jump back into the set of questions. Hopefully that answered just like the idea of like, what is a design system? Okay, next, adding a design system or library to Figma. Okay, so this is, there's a couple things here, right? You could be in a situation where you want to go grab a open source design system, something that's already built, something that's already out there. I want to bring that in and use that in Figma. There's another situation where you may have built something simple and then you want to add that as a library in Figma. So I'll show you both routes. So first one, we'll just stick with Ant Design, right? If we want to go add a library, I actually went searching and there's like a newer updated version of the Ant Design library. If you're using the one that we already had in there, don't like that. That's great. That one's totally fine. Nobody freak out about this. I'm just showing you that like I found a new updated one. So I'm going to show you how we can add it. I already added it, but I'm gonna show you how I did it. So first, I searched Ant Design Library Figma, and one of the first links that popped up was an actual like you want to go to the source anytime you can. So this is from ant.design. So this is their web page, right? And I come down here to their design resources page. You can see they've got stuff for Sketch, they've got mobile component, like all sorts of great stuff in here. And I come down, there's a UI kit, open source library. So this is the one that I added. So I clicked on it and it opened up a community file. So this is how most files and stuff are like distributed and used and stuff in Figma now, is through this like community file type of idea. Same thing with like plugins and whatever. So what you see here is like a little preview of what you're going to get. They can put in like a description and all sorts of things here. I apologize. That is my pizza showing up this evening. If you heard that doorbell. So, but you want it in your file, right? So you're going to hit duplicate. So if I hit duplicate, it's going to open a new tab. Actually my like Figma design tab, like in the browser. Sometimes it'll open directly into your like local Mac app, which is ideal. But if it just opens in your browser, it's okay. Since you duplicated it, if you need to go find it in your Mac app, you actually can just come in here and go into your drafts. So anytime you duplicate something, it's going to show up in your draft. So you can see it just popped up in here right now. So I open this up, give it a second. There are a lot of components in here. And I've got a whole set of this one is like really crazy. The V1, if you want something a little bit more simple, you could stick with that V1 library file. This one has got a lot of stuff in it. So they split everything up into pages, right? Just one page for buttons, another page for icons, another page for typography. So they even use blank pages as like dividers in the side. Anyway, so these guys are nuts. I love what they're doing here. A little bit overwhelming, but I could show you how to potentially tackle this to make it a little bit easier. So I come in here, all these things have already been made components in here. So you can see, and they're even using variants. You see that nice little outline right there. So these buttons are all set up as variants, which makes things really slick. So I'm going to hit assets. I go in here to assets and you're going to see everything is listed as a local component because I'm in the actual design library, like the Ant Design library file right now. So it's a local component to this file. Now, if I want to make this a library, you've got this little book. So a book library, make sure you remember that. Hit that icon. This little guy is going to spin up right here. My wife's making faces at me through the window. And you can see right here, current file, Ant Design, open source community file, and it's got this button to publish. So right here, if I want to make this available to the whole org, I can click publish. So I'm not going to click it right now because I already did it, but you can see then after I click publish, it's going to show up in this list down here as something that I can turn on. Thank you, Lily. So if I come down here, you can see I put it in this section for labs libraries. You guys, not everybody will, like some of you will see this, some of you may not see it. But just for organization's sake, and we have a million files. You would not believe what this, what Figma looks like from my end as an admin and instructor. So these are all like the different teams that we have. So if we have different ones for every single full-time, part-time group and everything. But if you come down here, we have, actually did it pop up since I just edited this? Let's see. Where are you? Design library. Where's our libraries file? What in the world? Why is it? There we go. I don't know why it's in the middle, but whatever. It was down at the bottom just a second ago. So I actually moved the file into here so that we just have our like labs, official libraries, all kind of in the same place. So I moved the file in here, and you can see we've got them both in here. Anyway, so that's like where the core like file lives, but when I publish it as a library, then it's available in that drop down wherever I go. So if I'm over here in like, you know, my experiments file, which you should all have an experiments file just to like mess around, do whatever you need to in there. I can come in here, open libraries. I have right now, if I have it off, you can see there's only my local components in here. There's a messy variety of stuff. But if I say, hey, I want to use that open source design library kit, then I come in here and I turn it on and boom, everything's in here. Open up a button, I drag a button in, and hey, look at this. I've got, it's all hooked up with variants, which is really sweet. And that makes it much nicer than it used to be. It used to be that there was like a million drop downs under button. Now there's just one button. You drag it in, and that's how that goes. Okay, so now if you said, oh, I created my own set of components, I want to publish it, it's actually the exact same workflow, except you're just starting in your file rather than having opened a community file. So let me come in here, let me turn off the Ant design library. Okay, so now you can see I did have some of these local components. Like this was something I made for a lesson. And anyway, so you can see you've got some fun variants hooked up there. And then I say, you know what? I want to publish this for everybody to use as a library, or I could just publish it for myself to use as a library. I can come up here to experiments. I click publish, and then it said, you know, asked me to describe any changes. So you can update it. If you add stuff later and you want to update it, you can update it. And then you can go in here and see like, what is it that's actually getting added? And they'll give you a nice review. And then you have a checkbox. Should I allow everybody to see this or just myself? Up to you. Depends on how you're using it. And then you can click publish. This is just a whole mess of stuff. So I don't need to publish this. So I'm going to click cancel. All right. I think that should answer that question. Okay, show how to turn a library on and off for a file. Okay, so I think I did just show that. So you open up again that little book, the library panel. I can turn on and off every single one of these. You can have as many of these on as you want at the same time. It's going to make your side asset panel really, really messy. So I would just say, generally, you'll typically only have one design library turned on at any given time. But you may want to do some wireframes at first. You may have like a wireframe library. You'll turn that on. Then you're like, well, I'm done with wireframing. I'm going to move into some hi-fi stuff in the same file. Turn the wireframe off. Turn your other library on. Whatever. You can do that to make it a little easier. And again, remember, if you're like, wait, how did you get here? Remember, most of the time you're operating in this layers panel. So you've got your pages up here. And then your actual layers are down here. And then, so if you want to switch over to assets, this is where any components or library stuff is going to live. And you can open and close these guys. Okay. Next up, difference between library and local components. Okay, I think we already kind of touched on this a bit. But again, local components are just things that are actually used in this file. So this one that is called experiments, if I create components inside of here, it's only this experiments file is going to know about them, right? So if I create some circle and it is going to be a blue circle, and I'm like, hey, let's make a component out of this. Whoops. So Command Option K, or you can right click and jump in here. I make a component out of this, right? If I go look from any of my other files, I'm not going to see this, but it does show up over here. So it'll look and say what file, like, is it in my local file? And then what page is it on? So you remember, I am on the page titled Auto Layout. And so that's how it organizes it over here. It goes logo components, and then on the page called Auto Layout, here's my ellipse 4 that I just created. And I can drag a bunch of these in or whatever. But then as soon as I want this to be in a library, then I would come over here and I would publish. And if we look in here, you can see that ellipse number 4 is showing up. So if I click publish, then this is going to be a part of a library, and you'll be able to see this on any other file that you turn it on. Okay, all right, back to, all right, side panel and navigating components. I know we've kind of been reviewing this already, but I'm just gonna hit it specifically again. Feel free to skip ahead if this is feeling redundant. So let's turn on the Icebreakers library. This is actually one we just use for like brainstorming and fun activities. And it's a very, very small library, but we wanted it available across all of our different files. Local components, and then using this file, and then Icebreakers. Everything is done with these little drop downs. You can switch the view a little bit. So you can show it as a grid where you get this little, this is the list. You see a little thumbnail plus the text next to it, or you can show it in a grid where it just shows visually what it is, and then you hover over it and you get that little tooltip showing you what it is. I don't know that I really have a preference for which way to look at them. Again, this used to be a total nightmare before variants. But now that variants are a thing, try to always do your components in variants, because then you open up buttons and you'll just have one button and you drag it in, and then you can make change all the variants and the properties or whatever. Yeah, so as far as navigating around here, again, you have your layers. This is how you get to, when you're on layers, this is your pages. These are all of your different frames that are on a specific page. Come over here to assets. This is where you're going to find all your components. So click any one of these and they're going to open up. You can open all of them or close them all, whatever. And then you can just grab anything and drag it on. So like you see here, this is something I made with variants. There's one component called Streetlight here. I drag it on, and then I come over to my different lights that you can turn on. All of them on, all of them off. So these would have showed up previously as all different versions of a streetlight. So they all would have been listed out here, but now with variants, it's kind of nice that I can just have the one thing and then alter it over here. Okay, next, okay, drag and drop components out of the side panel. I just showed you how to do that. You just click and pull it over. Editing an instance without detaching. So if I have this guy and I come over to layers, you can see when I open it up, there still are layers preserved here. So occasionally, if you're using a design system, oftentimes you're trying to make things in a way that you don't have to do this very frequently, but occasionally you do, right? If you're building a button, you're like, hey, I need to change the text in a button. Actually, that's a good example, right? We've got a component here that is a button. I can just click in all the way until I'm editing, or like what you saw here, I can open up the layers. There's like a wrapper here, and then there's text. So I can click down till text is selected and then double click and, you know, change this to whatever I want, right? Or you can even grab some of the other elements. And if there are like colors you need to change or whatever, you could, let's see, you can break things, you can change their styles. But if you're using a design system, you're trying to like make things so that like they're ready to go out of the box, and you're just maybe updating the text or swapping something out. But you can open up the layers, or you can hold Command, and that will help you click down to a specific layer. Whoops, let me see. Oh, my Zoom controls are all in the way. Anyway, so that's how you can alter your components. If you want to do some major surgery and you're like, hey, this actually needs to turn into probably a different new component, you could take this guy, you could right click it and hit detach instance, or option command B, I guess it'd be for break it. And now it is no longer a component. So now I could just go in and like mess with like all sorts of things in here. So like I just broke this off of a style, and I'm changing the color or whatever, you know, anything like that. And then if I wanted to make this now a new component, hit Command Option K, and now this is a new master component here. There are situations where you will sometimes do that. Okay, text styles, color styles, and I'm probably going to just talk on grid styles as well really quickly. So this is a common question I get. It's like, when should I use components? When should I use styles? So the specific times you want to use styles are text, color, and grids. So let's just try a few of these. So like I made this blue, right? Here, let's just start with something new. We'll just make a rectangle and say I want to create some hot pink, you know, that I want that to be my primary action color or whatever. So if you come up here into styles, and I click this, you can see just locally there are no styles that show up here. If I actually, I'll show you this too. If I turn on something that does have styles, so if we like turn on Ant Design and I come down in here, and now I open styles, you can see styles show up as part of a library. But maybe this is something new. I want to create my own new color. So I'm going to hit plus, and we'll call this perfect pink. And so now you can see it here. That's how you create a style. If I do anything else, like I write some text, and then I come in here and I use that color on it, or say like I create another shape, and let's even get rid of the fill and let's just do a stroke. And on the stroke, let's just use the color. So we've got all these different things that I've applied that style to. So notice I didn't go in and copy the hex code and apply it. I didn't type it in. I didn't draw the little thing in the color picker. I didn't do the eyedropper, none of that. I just went and grabbed the thing and selected my color style. Now, what's great about this is, say I'm like, hey, this perfect pink is actually not so perfect. I actually want a perfect purple instead. I'm going to edit my style, and now I've changed it to purple. Now, everything that has used that style is going to be altered. So that's how we just did it with color. If we do it with text as well, so say let me turn this off so we're not confusing again. Okay, so let's say I've got some text here. I've got a header. I am, here, let's break it. Okay, so now it's a regular piece of text. I'm making some sort of header. I want it to be really big. I want it to be really heavy. This is like a header style. So I've got this set at the size and the weight that I want it. Now I'm going to go into text, and it's got the little 4 dots. That's for style. Hit it. I'll hit a plus. I'm going to call this header. If you want something more descriptive, you could maybe say the size like 36 or whatever. Now if, okay, so when I create a new piece of text, it automatically just used what I had. But actually here, let's do this. So I've got this other piece of text that was totally different size, totally different weight. And I say, hey, I actually want that to be a header as well. I can come in here, and there's my style. I'm going to apply it. It kept the color, which is cool. And then it applied the size and the weight to it. So as you go out and you build your components, you build, say, your buttons or your text fields or whatever, you want to use in those components text styles. You want to use the color styles. Anytime you're using a color, it should be a style. Anytime you're using text, it should be a text style. If you find, oh, I need a new size here, well, make the new size and then make a new style out of it and name it something else. And that way, as you're going throughout and updating your designs, or say later you've published your design system, you're like, crap, I really think that header needs to be, a 34 size instead. I need to just change it a little bit. You could go in, change the style, re-update your library, and everything's ready to go. And then, okay, and then lastly, the last style you can create is with layouts. So I just hit F for a new frame. I'm going to come in to find like a desktop, and you've got a layout grid here, and you can notice the style button pops up again. So for this, I can change this. So say I've got like a common layout. I want everything to like have like a nice margin of like 120 pixels. And then I want like 12 columns with, say, like a 24 pixel gutter between them. Then I would change this to columns. I'd say I want 12 columns. My margin, I want it set at 120. And then my gutter, I want it at 24. So that's really great. I've got my page set up. I'm going to be creating some, dashboard type things that are all going to like snap really nicely to this grid. Maybe I've got some things that are going to go 2 column versus 3 column or whatever. And then I'm going to make sure these guys are spaced 24 from there. So you can see I'm creating all this nice, easy spacing, everything's snapping. It's really great. I'm like, hey, I want these same guides on every single other screen that I make. So come back here and I say, let's go into my styles and let's make this a new one. So we're going to call this maybe my desktop 12 column, 12 column. Let's call it that. Create style. So now anytime I create a new frame, let's drop another one on here. I have no grid. I say, hey, let's just apply the one that I already made. So I don't have to go in and like remake this again or anything like that. It's just ready to go. Also, hot tip with grids. If you have not learned this hotkey, stop what you're doing and practice this. On a Mac, it's Control-G for making grids visible or hidden. Never, ever, ever, ever again try to go in and like subtract it or delete it or hide it, the little eyeball hide or whatever. Like, don't ever do that. Just learn Control-G, and you can make as many of these as you want, and it will turn them on and off for everything all at once. Okay, so that's how all the different styles work. Okay, next up, best practices when making components. Okay, so this is a great question. Common question is like, where do I put them? What do I do? Now my little 10-month-old is coming up to the door. So I'm not going to talk about like actually creating the individual little components. This is more going to be around like organization, like where do I put them? So it's a good idea to put all your components in like a singular page. So similar to what we saw with like in this Ant Design file here. I mean, they have so many that they've broken these each component type into its own page. But let me just show you an example. So like in, let me just jump into like one of these lab sections, go to projects. So we had, we always gave everybody a template to start with. So you should be familiar with this, right? So you jump into your template and you've got your place to put your thumbnail. All these pages over here, every single one of these has a purpose. Put your inspiration here, split your work up as you're working. Each sprint, jump to a new page so you can see kind of your progress. You know, final handoff page for different types of things. And then here we go. We put some little emojis in here, little hammers and stuff. I'm going to put all of my typography on a page. I'm going to put all my grids on a page. I'm going to put all my colors. These are all my styles, right, that I just showed you. And then any components I'm going to put in here. So there's also instructions on how to kind of name them and organize them and what to do here. But generally you want to follow something similar to like what they're doing here. So notice like the actual components are in here. This stuff up here, these are all just labels. Things are grouped and kind of put into nice sections. The idea here is at some point, you're probably going to need to hand a design file off to another designer. So if you're working at a company and you need to pass a project off to someone else, you're going to move on to something else. You don't want this to just be a dumpster fire of just stuff randomly all over and different like master components on random pages. Like you want this to be easy enough so someone could jump in with no instructions and know where to find and use everything. Okay, let's see. Variants. Okay, I'm actually not going to talk too much about variants here other than you should absolutely use them. It's a big new feature and this is mega important to design systems. So Lisa and I taught a variants lesson in Visual Design Club. I will link the video in here. But just for a quick view of what they can do. I think I showed you that already with that little like street light that I was pulling in. Rather than all these different versions of a street light, one with, you know, all the lights turned on, a red light, a green light, or whatever, rather than having those all be their own thing in the component panel, it allows me to just come over here and have a drop down, or you could do toggles if there's just two versions of something. One thing I will point out is you need to be able to learn new techniques, new technologies, new things very quickly, very easily. So in this situation, I was getting so many questions. How do we do variants? How do we do variants? How do we do variants? Like I'm happy to teach everybody and I want to do that. But a more valuable thing I can give you is the knowledge and the insight on how to teach yourself. Because you're going to get on the job and then all of a sudden, you know, you're not going to have the instructors or whatever. And the next variants, whatever it's going to be called, you know, the next big thing that's going to change in Figma is going to come. You're going to have to teach yourself. So what I was telling a student the other day was like, all these people were asking for lessons on variants. It was brand new. Lisa and I didn't know it either. So we set aside literally just 1 hour of time to teach ourselves so that then we could teach you guys. So we both actually attacked it the exact same way. And I want to show you really quickly what we did. So both of us immediately went to Google and we looked up Figma variants. And we both clicked on the exact same thing and learned from the exact same place. And we weren't surprised that we ended up in the same place. So we both landed on this first. So think about it. Figma as a business, if they release a big crazy feature and people don't know how to use it, their company is going to go underwater. They're going to not be successful. So they probably have an in-house video team with talented developers that just spend time making tutorials and making killer content. So when there's a crazy concept like this that comes out, they are going to make a whole bunch of versions of videos, test them, see which ones work, and output the best training material possible. So like, I can teach you, but I bet Figma is going to teach you better than I can teach you, if that makes sense. So we both landed on this video. And what I did was I spent probably 45 minutes on this video. You'll see it's a 15-minute video because I went through, I would pause, and I would do the work in my own file. Keep going, pause, do the work in my own file. Rewind, because I didn't catch that. Rewind it again, try it again, try it again, try it again. Okay, now I got it. Keep going. So anytime there's a Figma created tutorial on something, you should absolutely go watch it first. There's going to be a whole bunch of other like wannabe design influencers out there that are going to create their own videos on variants, and I can guarantee they're not going to be as good, and sometimes they're not accurate or not great. So start with a Figma labeled tutorial first, and then maybe build on it from there if you need something more niche. Okay. Let's see. Okay, so that was a quick thing on variants. Complexity of choosing the right component from Ant. Okay, so if we go into the Ant design system again, everything's so crazy complex in here. Sometimes, like if you look at this stuff and you feel overwhelmed, I will tell you, like, you're not alone. I feel the same way when I look at this stuff. And so what I generally will recommend is like a design system like this is built to be so comprehensive that you could use it for like a huge, like Fortune 500 company across like 50 different products and have every need met by this design system. When you're designing a labs product, or if you're at a startup or you're at a company that only has like 1 or 2 or 3 products, this design system is actually probably overkill. So how does this relate to the question that was just asked? Well, you can see here, like with buttons, they have a large, a medium, and a small version of a button. Most likely in your product, you probably only need one size of button. When I was at Symantec, we got into a position where I would actually need large, medium, and small buttons because sometimes we had these crazy dense data rows and stuff like that. And then other places we had room where we could use large buttons. And our method was basically we preferred to use large buttons, but if we were constrained, then we may need a small button or a small text field or a small row or a small table or a small, whatever. So there's all these variations there just in case. But if you don't need those things, then get rid of them and don't have them cluttering up your workflow. So what I would do is if I'm starting a new labs project, it's pretty simple. It's pretty straightforward. I'm going to come in here. I'm going to grab all the stuff I need from Ant Design, and I'll probably make like a new page, like, actual needs or something like that, right? And hey, Cal, I'm recording a video. Can you not come in here? Okay, yeah, turn it all the way off. Perfect. So I'll just like create like actual needs. Then I would go into my asset panel, and then I would just start dragging in maybe the only buttons that I need or the only components that I need. So there's gonna be a whole bunch of like crazy stuff in here that like, maybe my product doesn't even use a date picker or whatever. So maybe I don't need that. So only pull things in like as you need them, and you can create a simplified design system out of the Ant design system. And so what I would do at that point is I would break all the components off of the main design system, and then I would just create new components out of them. And if you want to like make a set of variants out of the different types of buttons or whatever, you could totally do that. And anyway, so that's one way you could approach it that would make your life easier. So it takes a little bit of time to invest at the beginning to search through and find the right things that you need. But that's one way to really easily simplify. Okay.
7 o'clock.
Let's see. Should I use a library and the trade-offs of each of these choices? Okay, so I just kind of touched on this a little bit. So when should I just use Ant straight up? If you don't already have some like design direction and you've got like a really big, crazy, complex project. So say like I at one point was at a startup, we had like 5 different products, but we were starting everything from scratch. We ran and grabbed a design system and used that. We made some of our own small style changes, and it was really great because we got up and going really, really fast. Next part of this question: when should I alter Ant? So the easy things to alter are color, type, and corner radius. And that's going to give actually your product a lot of its personality and its flavor. So if you can stay with just those changes and leave everything else as is, then you're going to get some of the styling that you want with minimal effort. You'll like have like a pretty good design system ready to go. You can take Ant and like break parts of the components and do more custom things. So like, we were just talking about like a date picker. You're like, I don't really like their date picker, but I like everything else. Then break it. You could break the date picker and make your own. You'll just have to talk with your developers and say, hey, I broke this date picker. I'm going to need you to build that custom. So that's going to take more time and effort. So look at your timeline, like your resources, and make that decision. And then the last kind of option is you just go like full custom, right? You don't start with Ant. You don't start with something else. You want to do your own whole design system. If your project's really simple and straightforward and not too crazy, this actually can be a great and not too crazy route to go. And so you could just draw everything from scratch on your own. That's like a great exercise. I highly recommend everybody does that. They should have experience doing that. But you could also like, from a few different design systems, you could pull in some stuff from Ant, you could pull in some stuff from like Lightning or whatever. There's tons of design systems out there. Kind of learn what you like and see what things you like from each of them. And then you could just break everything apart and then make your own like set of components, maybe using some of those things as inspiration. Because buttons are all roughly like the same sizes and text fields are roughly the same sizes. So you could kind of start with some inspiration that way. Okay, and then grid, let's see. Next, grid. Okay, so I specifically wrote Henry's name in here because he asked a very specific question about some stuff in the Ant design, like reference docs. So he posted these images. Let me see if I can open this up. And so Ant design was talking about these common scales. And so they're showing these numbers in blue, in red, and then they're showing all these different sections down here, and they're kind of like showing these blocks on these pages. This is a very, very sophisticated approach to layout when you're dealing with a very, very sophisticated group of products and a high number of products. So again, when I'm at Symantec, we've got 15 different products. This is the type of stuff that we would look at and do. So I want to make sure that if they're all using a side navigation flow, like they all should use the same spacing, the same layout, the same all of that. If they're using an app bar, it should always be the same size. If they have a side toolbar slide out or something, that should be the same size. If they're spacing from the left, navigation panel to, say the rest of the content on the page, that should be consistent. So something like this can come in handy when you're trying to manage this across like 15 different products. When you're doing your own labs project, you don't necessarily have to do that. So you can create your own grid, decide on your own margins, decide how many columns you want, and it's up to you. You're trying to just use your eye to understand where there's enough spacing, create really great vertical lines with all of your content. But as far as like Are you going to have one column of layout, like a Medium article? Are you going to have, you know, 2 columns showing things side by side? Are you going to have 3 columns? You're going to have 4. You're going to have 8, like a bunch of little widgets on in a dashboard or whatever. So that's all up to you to decide. So like coming down here, this section is now talking about margins. So yeah, margins are generally an area where you're going to say everything stops here. Doesn't matter if you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 columns or whatever. Nothing goes beyond here. And then everything else inside just divides up, right? Yeah, things are going to change a little bit when you're talking about responsive design and breakpoints and things like that. So I think that's what they're talking about here. So as you're resizing, nothing will ever go into the margins, but things may kind of shift and resize. And then at certain breakpoints, we're going to shift from a whole bunch of things side by side to boom, we're going to have, you know, maybe things stacked on top of each other, more things stacked on top of each other, etc. So again, like Henry, don't worry so much about this documentation in here. This is where you're just going to want to talk with your developers and probably do, like, if you're working on some responsive stuff, try designing mobile first and then design desktop. And then if you need a few different steps in between to show like, hey, as we get wider on a tablet, actually, let's have these things move over and be side by side, right? And then as we get bigger to desktop, it can spread out even more and things can reshuffle. So oftentimes when you're designing for responsive stuff, you'll end up with like maybe 3 or 4 or 5 different mockups at just like different sizes in between, like small mobile all the way up to large desktop. So you don't have to stick exactly to what they're outlining here in Ant. Maybe use one of these as a good starting point, but don't feel like, oh, I have to memorize all these different formats and all these different layouts and all these different crazy things. Don't let it overcomplicate it. You're in charge and you ultimately get to decide on how these things get laid out. One thing you will notice in here with these numbers and in the description, they do talk about, I think they talk, I was looking through the documentation, it talks about like using like an 8-pixel grid. And so that's one thing I do want to talk about really quickly before I finish up. But like you'll hear all the time an 8-pixel grid, 8-pixel grid. And it's not truly like a grid per se. So if I come in here, let's go back to this like experiments page. Let's drop a desktop frame in. So a lot of times I'll see students mistakenly add this, an 8-pixel grid, like, oh, everything has to snap to 8 pixels. This is not exactly what is intended. This is too rigid, and things don't usually work exactly like this because you can't always know that everybody's screen resolution is going to be a perfect multiple of 8, or the math just gets kind of messy. So what I usually like to say is don't worry about doing that grid. All you want to turn on is just your columns, right? So this would be pretty column to do like a 12 column layout. And then where the 8 pixels comes in handy is when you are like sizing things. So left and right, I'm going to snap to my columns. But then as far as like how tall do I make this some sort of multiple of 8. And you can do math in here. So you do 8 times 20 in there and make this 160 pixels tall. And then like say I'm going to have you know, some more things that are going to go vertically. I don't have horizontal rows turned on. I don't want them turned on because they're actually kind of pointless. They don't really work very well unless you're doing like a photo grid that everything's perfectly the same size. But usually you end up with some things that are like this and some things like that. And then, you know, something else might be like super tall or whatever. So make sure each of these, the size of them is a multiple of 8. Ooh, that one was close. We'll make that one 88 tall. And then I'm going to check, I'm going to hold Alt and hover over this. I am 36 away from that. That's not a multiple of 8. So like 32 could work, but I'm like, hey, I've got gutters of 24. Why don't I do 24 and keep some nice even spacing there? Anyway, so with an 8 pixel grid, just know that it's mostly talking about the size of things and the spacing of things. But as far like when you're dealing horizontal, snap to your columns first. If this doesn't happen, this is, let's see, 160, that happens to divide by 8. But if it doesn't, don't worry about that. Focus on snapping to those columns first. When you're dealing with things in 8 pixels, one quick tip also is you can change your nudge amount, which is like when you hold shift and you move something. So if you just search nudge in here, I almost always will have this set to 8. By default, I think it's 10. So I like to change it to 8. And a small nudge is like when you're not holding shift and you're just pressing arrows, moving things around. Okay, let me go back and see. I think that was the end of the list of questions. Let's see. Let me stop sharing. And so again, let me know if you like this format, if this was helpful. And we may potentially do more of these with some more topics and questions. See you guys later.